Okay. Good morning, Pete. Good morning, Aaron's. Good morning, Christy. Hope you guys are well. Welcome. Technically, I guess yesterday would have been the first day of America's 250th birthday. Starting yesterday would have been, based upon how it's counted, the first day of the next 250,000 years, whatever you want to say, for the United States. So today's number 2. Yesterday, I guess, was a day of celebration. It was a day of celebration for many in the United States. Mark Kulak, Houstonic.live, 11 a.m. Sunday, July 5th, 2026. But today is the next day. Celebrations are over. And starting now, it's time to determine whose voice is going, or whose voices are going to be considered the seminal voices for the next 250 years of the United States. And I'll tell you what, the United States is doomed and will not make it to 500 if it's a bunch of blank, blank, blank who can't handle saying uncomfortable things. So let's start off here. Why is that screen black? Will that screen get some color if I hit a refresh? Good. This is the book called The Hot Zone. The Hot Zone. It's by Richard Preston. Richard Preston, okay? The Hot Zone. I've started to play some of the audiobook for The Hot Zone. You can get it on Amazon Audible. I do not know if the audiobook for the Hot Zone is at all censored. I don't know. One of the reasons why I started to play the Amazon Audible audiobook for the Hot Zone is, well, first of all, so we could all listen to it together, but also to see if there were any censoring in the book. Now, we didn't make it that far because we're always getting jerked in all kinds of different directions, and I apologize for that. You do what you can, right? You try to stay steady on the course for as long as it seems appropriate at a particular moment. So we didn't make it that far in, and maybe 20, 30, 40%, somewhere around there, we made it. And as it turns out, we couldn't find any major censorship. Now, the Hot Zone is... It's basically about an army, a leak in a U.S. military biological research laboratory in the Reston, Virginia area, close to Washington, D.C. And it is something that is similar to, akin to, or identical to, but just with a different name, Ebola. And it is some sort of horribly pathogenic Ebola. And it came to Reston after it was discovered in a jungle or something like that. Now, the Hot Zone, it was written, it was published, let me see if I can get the publication date from the book here. It was published in 1994. This is a 1994 book. Yeah, oh, Vilma, just hang in there. You ain't even going to believe how bad it gets. I appreciate that, Vilma, by the way, but it's going to get much, much, much worse right now. Right now, I'm entertaining the possibilities, several possibilities, and I think they're not just remote. I think they're likely. One is that Robert Malone has been had contact with, or probably even provided some preparation coaching to Candace Owens at the beginning of, or maybe even before, COVID-19. And I also suspect that one of the reasons why Russia was potentially even encouraged to go into Ukraine around March of 2022 was because the idea of pathogenic, deadly biological weapons out of laboratories, that narrative was crumbling so bad that it was something that they were planning, I think, for a while. for the UN to give Russia the okay to do that, for that Ukraine entrance. But I think that they actually allowed that to happen because they were losing control of the narrative so badly and so rapidly. So this book is published in 1994, and it's by Richard Preston. All right, Richard Preston. Richard Preston's family has a pretty long history of book writing, narrative controls, tangentially related to intelligence in the United States. I've done some research on them, but it only went so far, enough to know that there's probably a lot more. Now, although this book was printed in 1994, The Hot Zone being printed in 1994, the concept came out earlier than that. And in fact, can I find, I know I put the link around here. This is the New Yorker magazine. This is the New Yorker magazine from October 12th, 1992. And it's an article by Richard Preston called Crisis in the Hot Zone. A reporter at large. So the New Yorker magazine ran an article in 1992 called Crisis in the Hot Zone, Lessons from an Outbreak of Ebola by Richard Preston. I'm going to rephrase this another way, okay? The New Yorker magazine, whose lead editor at the time was Tina Brown, on October of 19th, 1992, ran an article by Richard Preston called Crisis in the Hot Zone, Lessons from an Outbreak of Ebola, which was almost the premiere of Ebola at this level and the fear of biological weapons, in particular Ebola, to the United States. It was in a Tina Brown magazine by Richard Preston. And now the Crisis in the Hot Zone then goes on after being pushed in the New Yorker magazine to become a book 2 years later, 1994, by Richard Preston. So the New Yorker article that gets everyone paranoid about this horribly pathogenic, deadly Ebola in 1992 in Tina Brown's New Yorker magazine, then 2 years later becomes a book. Now, this, I think, was the highest revenue or the most well-sold. It was a book promoted by Reader's Digest or something like that. It was the most successful book of the 90s by Richard Preston, The Hot Zone, promoting Ebola and lab leaks. Now, the picture that I was showing earlier is the credits for the book, okay? And let's zoom in. The main person that the book many thanks, is Harold Evans. Harold Evans is the husband of 40 years. He was married to Tina Brown for 40 years, 1981 to the time he died in 2021. Harold Evans was almost a co-author of this book with Richard Preston. The husband of Tina Brown, Talk Magazine. The husband of Tina Brown, Women of the World Summit. The husband of Tina Brown, whose associates include people like Anna Wintour of Vogue Magazine that gave Candace Owens a job. The husband of Tina Brown that did a movie on thalidomide that was produced by Harvey Weinstein that I just shared yesterday. The husband of Tina Brown co-authored this book with Richard Preston. And then Tina Brown is also thanked in the book. If you think it's a different Harold Evans, think again. Of course it's Tina Brown, because Tina Brown ran the New Yorker article, which itself was probably in the making for a long time. And by the way, the other name highlighted up there is Joshua Lederberg of Rockefeller University. Lederberg knows what's up, baby. Now, if you go through the pictures, you will see that Tina Brown and her husband, Harold Evans, and Harvey Weinstein have a very good friendship going all the way back to 1989, at least, maybe even earlier than that. Then Tina Brown starts Talk Magazine in 1999 with funding from Harvey Weinstein, Miramax, etc. And I didn't realize it, but another main editor of Talk Magazine was Tina Brown's husband, Harold Evans, or Harry Evans. Now, going back further, as I showed yesterday in this movie about thalidomide, let's see if I can pull up my my YouTube page here. No, actually, do I want to go to my YouTube page, or maybe I'll just go to my Rumble page? Yeah. I'll go to Rumble, and I think that will work out. Yeah, let's go here, and let's go to my content. Let's see here, my content. Okay, we'll make this full screen here. So I posted this video. It's a 2014 video, Attacking the Devil, Harold Evans and the Last Nazi War Crime, a Harvey Weinstein film, 2014. This documentary, which was produced by Harvey Weinstein with the efforts of Tina Brown's husband, Harold Evans, is about how Tina Brown's husband, Harold Evans, as this newspaper editor, as his journalist in England, was the main person who was breaking the story and sharing news about thalidomide, which is pronounced several different ways. That's the way I pronounce it. If someone's biggest criticism of my show is I don't pronounce the word right, well, they can go pound sand. All right. Anyways, that's the way I pronounce it. So deal with it. And so it's thalidomide. And I didn't know this. I didn't know that Tina Brown's husband is so connected in with that, because the story of thalidomide, first of all, as tragic as it is, okay, they're still making movies about it. And the movie starts off with no one notices all the people that died of this drug. Well, I don't know exactly how many died for real, but I do know that they highlight 100,000 approximate lives lost from thalidomide. Oh, by the way, in the year 2022, the United States has 110,000 lives lost to drug overdoses fatal. 2023 or 4, it was another 110,000, and that was just 2 years ago, and no one can even mention it. So it's bullshit to think that this particular tragedy this happened a long time ago, and they're still making movies about it. So sorry, order of priority is messed up. Even if it's true, the order of priority is messed up. But with that said, okay, is in the United States FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, was amended in 1963, 62 to 63, based in part upon discoveries made of the risks of thalidomide. And those risks were documented by several people, but one of the people that was included in researching those risks was a young patent attorney for the United States Department of Justice Antitrust Division named Les Weinstein, who is the father of Brett Weinstein and Eric Weinstein, unrelated to Harvey Weinstein, by the way. So Brett Weinstein and Eric Weinstein, who, are just all over the media landscape right now, all over the place. You can't go anywhere on the alternative media without seeing their ugly faces, okay? Even doing videos, worried about assassinations of Trump before Trump is even shot, even though it was fake. Their dad is wrapped up in that story, which means it's possible that and we know that the amendments, the FDA amendments, were originally led by Estes Kefauver, who was who died several weeks before JFK was assassinated. So once again, you know, the people that are working against you and truly seem to be the true toad lickers, toad suckers, toad eaters, the people who really are against everything that the United States stands for, are the people that claim to be providing some sort of incredible insight about John F. Kennedy assassination, while every single day dancing around the fact that one of the only people that JFK trusted, Estes Kefauver, died by a poisoning on the United States congressional floor. And no one will mention that. Anyways, just throwing that one out there. But the amendments were going in one direction that it was kind of hijacked by the thalidomide story. But this is, if you want to know why Brett Weinstein and Eric Weinstein were in a position where their parents were able to set them up in a certain way, it's that story. It's thalidomide. And here's Tina Brown's husband. Probably one of the main reasons that she got into all of these positions in the first place was also part of the thalidomide narrative from England. Now, it just keeps getting better, okay? So we have to establish the fact that Tina Brown is not just a journalist who covered Princess Diana's marriage and her death. She's not just someone that had a friendship with Harvey Weinstein and started a magazine called Talk, which is the only magazine that did an expose on Ehud Barak and Osama bin Laden before 9/11. A magazine that even included articles where they were interviewing Scott Ritter, the United Nations weapon inspector before 9/11. The same Scott Ritter that is included in a book called Germs, which was published by Judith Miller of the New York Times 2 days before September 11th, 2001. Publication date of sale, version 1, which is hard to find, was September 9th, 2001. And it includes an abundant amount of references to both Scott Ritter, many references to Joshua Lederberg, but he wasn't hiding. He wasn't hiding behind anyone else. He was expecting, I think, what happened, the way it played out. Written by Judith Miller, of course, and a couple of other co-authors. And, oh my God, the list of additional people. The executive director of the 9/11 Commission, Phil Zelikow, is also in here. Isn't that weird that Phil Zelikow, the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, is in a book about a biological warfare attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center that was published on September 9th, 2001? And until all this time, not one person other than yours truly in the entirety of the United States of America has been able to vocalize that. Other people are still trying to solve the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who most definitely is not dead. And I'll say this one's full screen right into the camera. If I am wrong about Charlie Kirk not being dead, well, guess what, assholes? We had 1 million killed in the opioid epidemic, deaths which were used to drive the deadly novel virus narrative that you still will not admit to. Meaning, even if I'm wrong, I am orders of magnitude less wrong than you assholes that still want everything to be about Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk and ignore mass murder during COVID-19, which is what this data which was used to drive the narrative in the first place. So, you know what? Get back to wasting your time and chewing up the money of your cat ladies that are throwing you all your money. You are the problem with the United States of America. You and your shriveled up little balls between your legs that you can't say why people died. You take money from people who are vulnerable to lie about why people die and pretend to be American. You worthless asshole scumbags. But let us continue. Let us continue with this amazing literary work. Okay, let's going back to the Hot Zone here, because the Hot Zone in 1994 also includes references and special thanks to, you guessed it, Heinz Feldman, who most definitely is not a Ukrainian general. Heinz Feldman, a German scientist who the United States chose to run its Rocky Mountain Laboratory as its scientific director. Heinz Feldman, the guy who brought in the person, another Dutch or German lady, who was the first person to take a photograph of COVID-19 after COVID-19 broke out, Emmy DeWitt. Heinz Feldman, a frequent collaborator of Robert Malone, is also in this book, having made it possible. But let us continue here, because we know that Robert Wallace Malone was involved as a whistleblower to the New York Times in the late 1999, early 2000s because of the unfortunate death of an American teenage boy named Jesse Gelsinger due to rather unnecessary experimental gene therapy. That Robert Wallace Malone, working with the New York Times, went to a reporter named Cheryl Gay Stolberg, who was an associate of Judith Miller. Now, when you want to start factoring this network going all the way up to Tina Brown and Harold Evans, I have good reason to believe that Robert Malone was already associated. How close, I don't know, but with the New York Times, Tina Brown, New Yorker network before 9/11. Of course he would have been, because many Robert Malone associates are included in both Germs and the Hot Zone. The same Hot Zone, that story was broken in 1992 by Tina Brown. The same Tina Brown network that if you start drawing all the connections, you will realize is a huge part of finding someone like Candace Owens and turning her into what she is right now, which is a disruptor. Candace Owens, promoted by Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, who was one of the lead editors in the first issue of Talk Magazine, hired by Tina Brown to write a hit piece on George Bush that was disguised as being bipartisan. The same Tucker Carlson, oh my goodness. And let's get back to the Germs book and Scott Ritter and United Nations weapon inspectors. Let's not forget about that. Because Scott Ritter, just hours before, oddly enough, hours before Russia decided to go into Ukraine in 2022, Scott Ritter decided to do interviews about the situation with Dan Cohen. And it's nice that Dan Cohen has given me a shout out, but I hope Dan Cohen is able to understand that it is about 1,000 times more than just the DNC. It's about the United Nations, and it's about the possibility that there was mass murder within the United States of America to justify the narrative of a deadly novel virus. That's bullshit. People were murdered. People were murdered. Life expectancy was taken down by drug overdoses of young people. Oh, that's a narrative that has actually been covered up by people like Jessica Hockett, who Dan Cohen also coincidentally interviewed, as well as Jessica Rose, who Dan Cohen also coincidentally interviewed right around the time that our adult son was dying of a drug overdose in 2022. Got to protect Robert Malone at any cost. Eat all the toads, suck all the toads, do whatever necessary to protect the people that you're paid to protect. That is how this works. That is how damning this page is. And I'm saying it right now, and I'm going to be putting the rest of the pieces together. It's just going to keep mounting. I believe that ultimately I'm going to make a case that Robert Malone, and by the way, Robert Malone interviewed Candace Owens just a few weeks before Russia went into Ukraine because they were concerned about the germ labs. The germ labs, which didn't really exist. It was a bullshit narrative made possible by Tulsi Gabbard and others. A bullshit narrative made possible by Andy Weber, who planted evidence in those laboratories going all the way back to 2005. As the Noon-Lugar Cooperative Threat Reduction Program that eventually became the DTRA, which Robert Malone worked for. Of course, everyone should know this shit. Nobody knows this stuff. People are afraid to even mention it. You know, what's the news today? Well, it was Charlie Kirk's microphone that exploded. It was a space beam. It was Charlie Kirk had exploding eyeliner. Charlie Kirk was hit with a directed energy weapon. Charlie Kirk was shot in this direction. Someone threw a exploding frisbee at him. There was a gun over here. There was a gun over here. There was exploding chairs, exploding table, exploding tablecloth, exploding tooth. Oh my goodness! It was the exploding tooth of Charlie Kirk. And it doesn't matter how many different narratives are thrown out there. People are like, oh my goodness, it's crazy to even think that he's not dead, but they will accept any potential narrative whatsoever. You could actually convince some people that Charlie Kirk had the poison tooth of Duke Leto of Atreides, of Dune movie, put it to his mouth because he was concerned that, Candace Owens or the Jews were going to kill him. People will accept any effing narrative whatsoever about Charlie Kirk as long as it ends with he died. That's how scientific the Charlie Kirk assassination narrative is. Anything whatsoever, any way, as long as he's dead. I'm going to make the case that Candace Owens and Robert Malone had known each other since before COVID-19 started, which means she's a fraud, which means the investigation of the Charlie Kirk murder is a fraud, which means Robert Malone, as we know, is a fraud, and which further proves that COVID-19 was a fraud. And it doesn't mean people didn't die. It means people were mass murdered. And there's a bunch of sissies out there who take money from cat ladies, pretending to be American, who are unwilling to say that people were just flat out murdered with supplemental oxygen, hospital protocols, and a wildly out of control opioid overdose epidemic in the United States of America, that instead of killing 6,000 people of fatal drug overdoses in 1980, we had 110,000, many of them young, many teenagers, and no citizen journalists have the confidence to be able to say it. Because they don't work for you. They don't work for America. They don't work for human dignity. I do, which is why I say that. And if you don't repeat it, why the hell are you wasting your time watching my program? There was a 20x increase over that period of time. Annual fatal drug overdoses, and people won't say it. It's going to keep getting worse day after day, week after week. And I appreciate what Cowan is doing, but it's going to take a whole lot more than just saying Democrats are bad, because that is missing the big picture by a million miles. God bless.